Hey guys, this is Piper here, and this is going to be a Rome to War tutorial. I'm going to cover some tips and tricks about chariots, some things about some of the special abilities of certain units, some of the effects of different terrains, and just basically stuff that you might not know already, or things that you might have to test yourself or research yourself to find out. So things that aren't apparent, but it's quite useful to know these things in a battle or multiplayer or if you're in a campaign. So the first trick or piece of information I'm going to tell you about is regarding chariots. So we've got 6 barbarian chariots here, and I'm against some cataphracts. And the key is when you use chariots against any form of cavalry, if it's a lot of cavalry, always make sure your chariots are in tight formation when you're attacking. They're closer together, and it means that they're less likely to rout and they'll do more damage. So we'll charge these guys in. So chariots are much better than cavalry, and barbarian are one of the best in the game. So always make sure chariots are in tight formation when you're attacking a lot of cavalry at once. So if you're attacking one cavalry unit with one chariot, always make sure it's in loose formation. You do a lot more damage when against a single unit of cavalry putting your chariots into loose formation. So if you have a lot of cavalry, a lot of chariots, put your chariots into tight formation. If it's 1 versus 1 against cavalry, or perhaps 2 versus 2, like small numbers of units, always put your chariots into loose formation, and they'll just destroy the cataphracts. So the next piece of information regarding chariots: if you're fighting chariots versus chariots, you want to make sure your chariots are in tight formation always. It could be any chariots, it could be warlord chariots, Egyptian chariots. If it's chariots on chariots, always make them in tight formation. And a strategy is to keep your chariots in loose formation. It reduces the risk of getting flamed by archers. When they're in combat, get them into tight. It just means that they're closer together, less chance of routing. Okay, the last piece of information regarding chariots, when you're using chariots: if you're fighting against infantry, just regular infantry, or skirmishers, any sort of infantry, it could be archers, infantry, anything, always make sure your chariots are in loose formation. They'll do 2 things. They'll do a lot more damage over a longer period of time, and they will survive longer. And it's also good information because if you're fighting against velites or archers, they'll have a slight advantage in regards to making the Slav chariots run amok. So having these guys in loose formation just helps them out a lot. As you see here, the skirmishers run away. So you don't want these guys to run amok, so keep these guys in loose formation. You can chase down skirmishers, chase down archers, and it will help defeat heavier infantry as well. So we looked before at some tips and tricks using chariots versus chariots against cavalry and against infantry. You have velites here, actually skirmishers, any sort of skirmishers. These guys get a bonus against chariots, and it's actually elephants as well. You'll never have to fight against elephants in CWB, but the bonus these guys get against chariots is actually +6, and that's on the missile attack and the melee combat attack. So these guys throw spears, and they have a shield and knife as a secondary weapon. But the primary weapon these guys use is the javelin. So you want to try and make sure you use all the javelins against the chariots first before you use the secondary. So in the game, another option is to bring camels. Everyone knows that camels are better than cavalry in hand-to-hand combat. If you look at the unit card here, we've got Numidian camel riders, and they have, if you look at the abilities, it says combat bonus in deserts, and they scare horses. So basically, these guys have an advantage over other cavalry that are horses in hand-to-hand combat. So that bonus is effectively +2 on the attack. So when camels fight cavalry, like horse cavalry, they'll get +2 on the attack. On the contrary, when cavalry fight horses, they have a disadvantage and they get -4 off their attack. So camels are very, very powerful versus horse cavalry in combat. Another thing to bear in mind about camels, it's actually just a piece of information, but camels do have a slight advantage over cavalry when it comes to fighting chariots. Chariots will destroy camels and cavalry, but for some reason in the game, chariots have a bonus disadvantage against camels, and that bonus is actually -4. So when chariots attack camels in the game, they will have -4 off the attack. So that could be quite useful information if you have to fight Pontus or Seleucid Empire or Britannia. You probably want to try and have a couple of units of camels in there just to get a slight advantage over your other cavalry. Here we have a unit of desert cavalry. If you just quickly look at the unit card, so pause the game here, it says here effective against armor. That ability basically means that when they fight, they only count half the enemy's armor. So in this battle here, we've got fighting against cataphracts. Check out their defense. So basically, it says here armor 18. So when these guys fight the desert cav, they only have armor of 9. So desert cav are very, very powerful versus heavily armored opponents. There's also some units that have secondary weapons that are armor piercing, and they have the same effect. The cataphracts have a mace when they fight for secondaries. They're also armor piercing. Some of the chariots have armor piercing secondaries as well, and they also count half of the enemy's armor. So in the game, there's certain units that have a combat bonus in woods or snow. It's usually barbarian factions. Here we have the Chosen Swordsman. It says here combat bonus in woods or snow. And we've also got the British Heavy Chariots. They have a combat bonus in the snow. So if the unit card says combat bonus in woods, they'll get +3 on the attack. And if it says snow, that's actually +2. So if these guys are fighting in woods and snow, they'd be very, very powerful. But they're actually fighting in the snow, so it's only +2. You'll probably never have to fight in the snow again during a proper 1 versus 1 competition. But it's worth bearing in mind if you're having a fun battle. So when you have infantry versus cavalry, you've got some urbans here. They're actually Praetorian cavalry. When these guys charge in, it's best to have these guys stationary. They'll take less damage. The better infantry can hold the formation fighting cavalry, the more chance these guys have of surviving. So you want to do your best to keep these guys together. So you want to have these guys in guard mode and have these guys stationary when cavalry attack. You can charge these guys out to attack if you had extra cavalry supporting you, but 1 versus 1, you want to keep these guys stationary when they attack, and they'll take a lot less damage. So the next trick is in regards to using the minimal UI, and that's basically how the screen's laid out, just a better format. So in the deployment phase, in the the unit selection phase, I chose in order 5 Praetorian cavalry, 5 urbans, 5 triarii, and 5 Roman archers. So that'll be cavalry, urbans, triarii, and then archers. And what happens is it actually lays it out in order at the bottom here, but things get kind of messed up. So say if you make your first line group 1, it will put some units at the end again. So basically what happened was it didn't have enough room to fit the general there, so put that at the start. And then if you make your triarii group 2, it will do the same again. So basically you've got your cavalry mixed up now. And this trick is always make sure your archers are chosen at the end. And that means that when the archer war happens, you can quickly choose your archers very, very fast. So if the archers were chosen at the start, like the cavalry were, it takes longer. Because instead of going from 2 archers to the third one, you have those units in the way. So always pick your archers at the end if you're using minimal UI. So I think everyone pretty much knows that spears are very powerful against cavalry and phalanx are very powerful from the front. So we want to try and sort of find out how much powerful they are. So what we'll do is we'll quickly look at, we've got 3 units of spear, sacred band spearmen here, 3 units of Libyan spearmen, we've got 3 units of Celtic warband, and 3 noble barbarian cavalry. So if we look at the unit card for sacred bands, it says here conform phalanx, bonus fighting cavalry. So the bonus fighting cavalry is actually +8 on the attack. We'll look at the Libyan spearmen. They also have bonus fighting cavalry, and they're also +8 on the attack. So they're very, very powerful against cavalry. +8 is a massive bonus. We've got the Gaul warband, they're light infantry. They also have spears, but they're not as long as the Libyan spears or the sacred band. So look at the unit card here, nothing about bonus fighting cavalry. I've done a bit of testing, and there's a bit of debate whether they're +4 on the attack or +8. The testing that I've done, they've been very, very powerful versus cavalry. I'm going with the consensus they're +8 on the attack. They might be +4, but they're very powerful versus cavalry. So basically, anything that has a spear is going to be +8 on the attack. And very most likely, these spears will be +8 as well. So the drawback of the spears is that they have a disadvantage versus infantry. So that'll be like urbans, any form of axemen. They'll have a disadvantage. And that differs between basically the units that have the actual ability highlighted and the units that are, they're actually called light spears. So the units that have the long spears, short spears, or basically they have that ability listed, they will be -4 on the attack versus infantry. And the units that are light spears, basically the ones that aren't listed, they'll be -4 defense versus infantry. So they have a more of a disadvantage versus infantry. So that should be the case. Just bear in mind that if you remember one thing, spears are always very powerful versus cavalry. So the phalanx are very powerful against frontal attacks, and phalanx are also slightly better versus cavalry in the sense that if you can block, basically the more ranks a phalanx has, the more bonuses it gets. So the research that I've done would suggest that for each rank of a phalanx, you get +1 defense. And basically for a phalanx you can get a maximum of 4. For the spear units it's the same concept, but you get a maximum of 2. So the phalanx will get more of a bonus for being deep. There's also other bonuses associated with having spear units in a deeper formation. When they're stationary they get extra bonuses, and when they attack they get extra bonuses. So if you have your spear units in a block formation like this, they'll also gain more advantages than being in a long formation. So fatigue also plays a big part in the game. Here we have a unit of equities, and it says here they're unhappy due to exhaustion, they're tired. We have another unit of Roman cavalry, they're also tired as well. We have 2 units of sacred band. So the Roman units are tired, and they're both tired, and the Carthage units are fresh. So when units are tired, they suffer disadvantages in combat, and it basically goes like -2, -3, -5, -6 I think off the attack. And when they're really tired they actually get defense taken off them as well. So if your units are tired they will be disadvantaged against opponents that have units that are fresh. Another thing is, if units are routing they'll have a lot less defense, and units that are attacking routing units will have a lot more attack. So it's really important to pay attention to your units and how much energy they have, because it will affect things in combat if they're very tired. So that's the end of the tutorial. Hope you guys have learned something interesting about some of the special units in the game, or you've learned some tips and tricks how to use chariots or skirmishers better. I know some of you probably already know the stuff, but it kind of helps a lot of the newer players that just started the game. I don't mind sharing my information. So again, thanks for watching this tutorial. Please like, comment and subscribe. This is Piper signing off.